Hey class, welcome back to World History 2. I hope everyone's having a great day today. Last time we began our look at revolutions. We looked at revolutions part 1, where we took a look at the Enlightenment and some social changes that were taking place. And today we're moving into revolutions part 2, which is going to be a focus on the American Revolution. Now, the American Revolution lecture was broken into 2 parts, this video and then the next video. This video is going to be focused on what led to the revolution and some of the revolution itself. And then next video, we'll look at the conclusion of the revolution and then the post-American Revolution. Stay tuned for the PowerPoint. Okay, class, we're going to move into Revolutions Part 2. As I just mentioned, Revolutions Part 1 was on the Enlightenment. Well, now we're going to move actually into the revolutions. The first one being the American Revolution, title slide there with Washington crossing the Delaware River. Okay, the American Revolution, just some background. 1750s, there's really no unrest in the colonies. The colonists were loyal subjects to the king, to England. There really was not a problem going on. But then within 25 years, they're going to be at war. So what really takes place? So there's no unrest. British law was being followed. They were reading British books. Goods were going back and forth between the colonies and England. People were leaving the colonies to travel back to see relatives in England, and then leaving England and coming back home to the colonies. They were enjoying British military protection from different groups, whether that be the Native Americans or they were other groups like the French. They were enjoying military protection from the British. But what happened was some things began to change. In the mid-1760s, the colonists were becoming dissatisfied with British rule. They began to start to enjoy their own autonomy. And the reason I say that like that is because even though they were a colony of England, they were a good distance from England. It took a long time to travel across the ocean in that day. And so, yes, you had governors and people in charge of the colonies, but it was still just so distant that they began to enjoy kind of like just governing themselves. They were kind of began to feel autonomous. The distance weakened royal power. So again, that distance across the ocean, well, the colonies' day-to-day lives and decisions that were being made on the day-to-day basis, that's then and now. That's real time. But the royal power was across the ocean, and it could take weeks to get word from them or some kind of a document from them. And so really the royalty, the monarchy, they didn't really seem to be all that powerful anymore to the colonists. The colonies, they had formed their own governing bodies, and this was under the approval of the British government. But these governing bodies, especially the local governments, the actual getting down into the towns and the cities or the towns, they began to create their own policies and their own laws, and they started to create their own little taxes for things and begin to create their own ways of protection, maybe a police force or whatever it may be. So they're basically forming their own kind of government in the colonies, again, separate from the monarchy, even though they were colonists. And what really started happening was England was struggling financially from the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763. In the United States, we call it the French and Indian War. So England was basically in a lot of debt, struggling financially because of that war. And so what happened was the British imposed taxes on the colonies to help pay for this war. So what happens is we begin to have resistance and boycott. The British imposed these taxes on goods to pay off these debts, and there's a short list there. It's important that you know these, of some of the taxes that they had to pay. Well, the first one is the Sugar Act of 1764. And that was a tax on sugar and molasses. And that's important because molasses are made in the colonies. Molasses are made from basically maple syrup. It can be made into molasses. And so maple syrup and other ways of processing sugar can make molasses. Well, a tax was put on this, and that wasn't very good. Stamp Act of 1765. Stamp Act is where publications and documents that required a government stamp or seal were taxed. And
you might not think of that big of a deal. I mean, if you go to a notary today to get something notarized and get a notary seal on your document as being authentic or being true or whatever you're getting notarized, you're going to pay a fee and you're going to pay a tax on that. But back then, when you never had this tax before, and all of a sudden you need to have a stamp put on something, especially an official document, and you had to pay a tax, it was very aggravating. Well, the taxes were kind of kind of large, expensive to pay, and so that, again, wasn't good. The Townsend Act of 1767 was basically a group of taxes. This act that was passed put a tax on paper, paint, lead, glass, and tea. And again, these things did not exist. So don't think it's like an increase in tax or something like that. No, these things you never had to pay a tax on. And all of a sudden, because these acts were passed in England, all of a sudden the colonists had to pay this money. And again, it's in a very short time, 64, 65, 67, and now the Tea Act of 1773 was another tax on tea. And that would really make some people upset. That leads obviously to the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party, but the Tea Act of 1773. Another issue that takes place is on March 5th, 1770, so we kind of go back in time a little bit. I didn't want to interject that in the middle of the list of the taxes. But on March 5th, 1770 is the Boston Massacre. It takes place where a group of colonists are killed by some British soldiers. And again, there's debate on who fired the first shot, who did what. Rocks were thrown, snowballs were thrown, and then the British shot or fired, and some colonists were killed. Well, that really upset people in Boston, because you have these British soldiers who are kind of like the law of the monarchy now just killing colonists. So things are kind of getting heated. Things are getting, people are speaking out against things and speaking out against these taxes, and now the British soldiers just killed some civilians. All of this stuff was enacted from faraway London. And the colonist slogan was, you probably heard this before, but no taxation without representation. They were being taxed, but yet they had no way of voicing anything in Parliament, because Parliament was in London, not in the New World, not in the colonies, and they were being taxed. So they were saying no taxation without somebody being in Parliament to speak for us. And so what they did was they began to boycott British products. There's a picture of the Boston Massacre. Okay, continuing with resistance and boycott, December 16th, 1773 is the Boston Tea Party. And there's a picture there of that with the colonists are throwing crates of tea into the harbor. And notice they're dressed up like Native Americans. That was one of the things that they did. The colonists did was they dressed up like Native Americans to kind of blame it on them. But no, it wasn't a fool to anybody. It was the colonists that did it. I was born and raised in the Northeast and lived there for a good long time until I moved here to Mid-America in Cordova, Tennessee, which was just fairly recently. But I grew up near all of this. I've been to some of the battlefields of the Revolutionary War. I've been to Boston. I've been to the harbor. I've been on the ship that is a replica of the one with the Tea Party. This building down here is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I've been inside that building. So I know quite a bit about this history, and I've been privileged to be able to live in an area that has such historic landmarks in them. When we get into the Revolutionary War, Valley Forge near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I've been there, and I've seen the Liberty Bell. I've been to Bunker Hill. Was going to Mid-America, the Northeast campus. I've been to Saratoga, the Saratoga battlefield. I've been to West Point. I pastored a church on Long Island, and there was a lot of Revolutionary War activity on Long Island with the spy circuit on Long Island. So I know quite a bit about this, and I've been privileged to be able to live and visit live near and visit a lot of these places. So that's the Boston Tea Party. 1774, they organized the First Continental Congress, and this First Continental Congress in Philadelphia was to organize a boycott and to send their grievances to the king. And then in 1775 to 1781 is the Second Continental Congress, and this is basically the formation of the beginning of the government. This Continental Congress gets together in Philadelphia, and they decide that they're going to raise an army for fighting the Revolutionary War. July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. There it is there. I've been in that room. I'm not sure if I have pictures on Facebook of that, but I've been in that room. Okay, so a timeline. Basically, the easiest way for us to go down through this the Revolutionary War is a timeline, and it's important to know and understand what's going on. We can't cover everything, obviously, and next PowerPoint will continue on. This is part one of the American Revolution. Next PowerPoint will continue on with some other timeline factors. But in March 23rd, 1775, Patrick Henry gives a very impassioned speech to Assembly in Virginia. And this is his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. And really, it helped kick off the revolution. He said this: "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." And so a very passionate speech saying we cannot live under the tyranny and bondage of this monarch. I would rather have liberty. If I can't have liberty, I would rather die. That's basically what he said in a nutshell. So not too long after that, a couple weeks later, April 18th, 1775, is the ride of Paul Revere and William Dawes, and that's the very famous "The British are coming, the British are coming" in Boston, Massachusetts. There's the "Give me liberty or give me death" speech by Patrick Henry. Okay, so here's a picture of Paul Revere. This is just a artistic representation of Paul Revere riding, saying this, and over here you can just imagine these are the Minutemen, guys that can be ready. I think I have a slide on that. Guys that can be ready at a moment's notice. Okay, so the next day, April 19th, 1775, begins the Revolutionary War. And so you can see the dates of it up there, April 19th, 1775 to September 3rd, 1783. So the Revolutionary War lasted a little more than 8 years. So Paul Revere does his ride, and then the next day is the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and that battle is called "The Shot Heard Round the World," because when that battle takes place, again, they're not sure who shot the first shot, but when that battle takes place, and it was a very short battle, it changed the course of history. And so it basically changed the world. That's why it's called that. But the British soldiers, they were in search of colonial ammo and powder, gunpowder. They said that they could not have that. And so they were looking for ammo and powder stores. And what happened was they fight the Battle of Lexington and Concord. The colonists won, and the British realized that this was not some unorganized band of colonists who were just out there shooting some soldiers. These were disciplined colonial Minutemen. And the Minutemen were colonial militias that could be ready at a moment's notice for battle. And this became the seed or the beginnings of the Continental Army, because after the Second Continental Congress, they're going to raise an army, and George Washington is going to be the commander-in-chief. But right now, it's just basically militiamen, who were called Minutemen, battling the British in the Northeast. June 14th, 1775, Second Continental Congress establishes the Continental Army, and George Washington is the general of the army, or the commander-in-chief. And 3 days later is the Battle of Bunker Hill in Boston. The colonists held, it's actually called Breed's Hill, but it's known as the Battle of Bunker Hill. The colonists, they occupy this hill in Boston. It's actually in the city of Boston today, and you can go on. I've been there. You can go on top of it. There's a big monument there now. But the colonists held this. Well, the British forces, known as the Redcoats, they want to take this hill, and so they make 3 assaults on the hill. Well, the first 2 assaults, the colonists beat them back, but the last assault, the British actually take it and control the hill, and basically they take control of Boston. Okay, so again, we can't cover all the different things that take place in the Revolutionary War, but 1776, on July 4th, the Declaration of Independence is signed. It's read publicly on July 8th. It then goes to some printers and is distributed throughout all the colonies. and obviously sent to the king, King George III, the king in England. August 2nd, 1776, delegates sign it. September 22nd, the British execute 21-year-old American Nathan Hale, who was accused of spying. And he has a famous phrase, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." December 26, 1776, Washington crosses the Delaware River and captures Trenton, New Jersey, from the Hessians. And the Hessians were German allies to the British. So the Germans were there, and Washington crosses the Delaware River and captures Trenton, New Jersey. And this was a big victory for the colonists, a big morale boost for the colonists, because there were some other things that were taking place. Don't forget, New York City, that was controlled by the colonists, and then the British take New York City. Another area, the Philadelphia, was controlled by the colonists, and the British take Philadelphia. And then throughout the maneuvers of the Revolutionary War, Philadelphia is regained because the British have to leave Philadelphia to go reinforce New York City, and the colonists take Philadelphia back, and then later on the colonists retake New York City. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth within the war, and then the war will eventually move south down into the southern parts of the colonies, which we'll touch on that a little bit later. That's kind of later, a little bit later in the war. But right now it's in the Northeast, and a lot of back and forth is going on. But it's a big win for the colonies. And there's a picture of Washington crossing the Delaware, fighting off the ice and crossing over. June 14th, 1777, the flag resolution is passed, and that is resolved that the colonies should have one flag. So before it was the British flag. Well, now that they're having a revolution against the British, they want to have their own flag. Betsy Ross is commissioned to sew or design and sew the first flag, and there's the 13 stripes, red and white. There's the field of blue, and then it was a circle of stars, 13 stars. It was a circle of stars. The flag, actually, the previous picture, you can kind of see it here in that painting. Okay, December 19th of 1777, Washington and the Continental Army winter at Valley Forge. And this was a real low time during the time for the Continental Army. They had run out of money. They had many of the soldiers had not been paid. They could not be supplied with proper winter clothing. They had minimum tents and things like that. So where they winter in Valley Forge, which is outside of Philadelphia, again, I've been there. It's a battlefield, or a national park, I should say, not a battlefield, a national park. You can go there and you can see some of the little log cabins that they built, and it was just not a good place for the Continental Army. They were they had very low morale. A lot of them were freezing, frostbite. There's stories of soldiers walking in the snow and leaving bloody footprints in the snow because their boots had worn through and they had no winter clothing. And it was just a really low time for Washington and the Continental Army. But there was good news. In the meantime, there was negotiations going on, especially with Benjamin Franklin and France. And so in 1778, the United States and France become allies, and that's critical. That's basically really helped out the colonies to be able to win. It was because of the French allies. There was a Treaty of Alliance of 1778, which France formally recognizes the United States as a nation, and that's very important because you can say you're a nation, you can say you're your own people now, or you founded a country or a nation or whatever you can say, but until other countries recognize you as a nation, you really have no legitimacy. And when France, who is a powerhouse in Europe, a long-standing European nation, when they say we recognize the United States as a sovereign nation, that really bolstered the colonies, really bolstered them. So on March 17th, 1778, the British declare war on France, and France begins to supply the Continental Army. That's how alliances work. And so the British are now at war with France also. And that's going to be it for this part of the Revolutions PowerPoint. I'll see you in a second.
All right, class, that's it for today. Next time, we'll be looking at Revolutions Part 3, where we'll be looking at post-American Revolution and what the newly formed United States did in regards to its government. Have a great day.